When Australians vote in September, one of the big issues confronting them will be jobs. As the recent stoush over foreign workers has shown, it's a sensitive topic, and it's made even more so by the steady decline of Australia's manufacturing sector. A succession of iconic brands like Rosella and Darrell Lea have closed their doors since last year, and they're just the latest. Factory work once accounted for a quarter of Australian jobs. Now it's fewer than 10%. The industry body Manufacturing Australia is determined to stop that decline, and tonight it's announcing a new executive chairwoman. Her appointment will be controversial because she's axed plenty of jobs herself, as Greg Hoy reports.
Manufacturing is feeling the heat, and nowhere more than the century-old foundry sector.
No foundry industry, well, there'll be no car industry, there'll be no manufacturing industry.
Australian manufacturing generally has long been in decline, but the high Australian dollar and rising energy costs have swung like a wrecking ball through this old industry. John Hine and Son in southern Sydney has operated for 130 years.
In the last 12 months and in the next 3 or 4 months, about 1,000 jobs in the industry are going because they're all small players, and government doesn't listen to small players.
If we don't arrest the increasing costs on making things in Australia, yes, it will ensure that businesses can't compete and they'll have to go offshore.
Look, we're experiencing structural adjustment across our economy, and especially in the manufacturing sector. There's, of course, statistics and statistics. If you have a look over the last 12 months, jobs in manufacturing have actually grown.
Not in the foundry sector. Keach Castings has survived for 79 years, but is also feeling the pressure.
Like most manufacturing business, the exchange rate has certainly been in the short term a hell of a challenge. We've seen an appreciation of our dollar, and that means that we've got to compete in the rest of the world at a disadvantage.
In the heat of such fierce competition and adverse trading conditions, more and more old foundries, it seems, are simply shutting shop and walking away. In fact, one of the biggest employers, Bradken Australia, is known to be building enormous production capacity in China.
Industry is not like a tap. You can't turn it off and on. Once you've turned it off, it won't start up again.
Many larger manufacturers tell a similar story. The packaging giant Amcor has shed around 15% of its 5,000-strong workforce in the past 5 years, recently announcing another 300 jobs will go with closure of 2 of its plants.
Well, I think probably 2 factors. One, the high Australian dollar and the ease of imports of the products that related to those 2 plants. And secondly, ongoing price increases in areas like energy, which is a particularly important cost input for us, means that we were less and less competitive.
Our business has been pretty tough the last 12 months, maybe one of the toughest years we've had in a number of decades.
Lindsay Partridge is the long-serving managing director of Australia's largest producer of bricks and tiles, Brickworks.
As far as our manufacturing side is concerned, it's been continually rising costs. More recently in gas and electricity have increased pretty dramatically, and of course there was the carbon tax embedded in our product from the 1st of July last year.
As a priority policy, we will get rid of the carbon tax. That's imposed on domestic manufacturers, which gives a leg up to imported manufactured products that don't have the carbon tax imposed upon them.
It's ridiculous to suggest that somehow by removing carbon pricing, manufacturing is going to flourish in some major way. That's nonsense. Electricity and gas prices have risen in recent years quite independently of carbon pricing.
With so many manufacturers hurting, the powerful lobby group Manufacturing Australia has been on the hunt for a new champion. Someone tough enough to flex the muscle of manufacturers in Canberra. 7:30 can tonight reveal who Manufacturing Australia's controversial new executive chairman will be.
Manufacturing in Australia doesn't need to be a sunset industry, although it does have significant challenges.
Sue Morford is renowned as the Iron Lady of Australian business.
Now, not all manufacturing is going to be successful in Australia, there's no doubt about that. But if we can put in the correct policies and if we can build the appropriate skill sets, then we can definitely encourage investment here in Australia.
Ms Morphett is a controversial choice, best known for her stormy 5 years as CEO of the troubled Pacific Brands, maker of Bonds, Burley and King G. Sue Morphett angered unions by slashing 1,850 jobs and moving production to China.
We want a job!
It was tough at Pacific Brands, it was tough for everybody, but we were up against the wall and we had decisions that we needed to make to save our company, which we did.
She went through a very difficult period of time and they made a lot of progress in turning that business around.
My understanding is that the Pacific Brands share price is about a third of what it previously was. And also, of course, you've seen over that period a pretty dramatic drop-off in sales.
Led by Sue Morphett, Australian manufacturing is about to begin its election year campaign in the nation's capital. Top of the wish list, cheaper gas for local industry.
We're taking policy suggestions and plans to Canberra Monday week. Energy abundance, how do we ensure that there is a local market for energy as well as an export market for energy, and that's used appropriately to be able to support local business. But also so that it can encourage investment versus going offshore where there is much cheaper energy.
But the Morphett message will be a tough sell.
I can't see a case for government stepping in somehow to encourage gas exploitation and delivery of subsidised gas for Australian businesses. The market is going to have to determine the supply of gas.
While government may face increasing pressure, so might the opposition over plans to axe the carbon tax. In the past week, there's been an increasing call from Australian industry for bipartisan political support for an emissions trading scheme to decide the cost of carbon. It's a significant shift.
If we're going to have a carbon scheme in Australia, let's make it a globally traded and a globally costed cost. I would welcome bipartisan support to this type of thing. Whether we're going to get that or not is another question, but I think that would be a great outcome.
For all the bad news for manufacturing workers, there are glimmers of hope. Manufacturers embracing innovation are finding international success.
Building machines and putting automation on machines. Today, we're an 800 people strong company. There isn't too many manufacturers who can say they export 99.5% of their production overseas, do all of the technology development in Australia and are number one in their market around the world.
I am an optimist, but I'm also realistic. Some businesses will have reached their use-by date here in Australia and others will not.